It's a pleasure and an honor for me to introduce Metropolitan Athenagoras. Metropolitan Athenagoras of Belgium and Sinope is a hierarch of the Ecumenical Patriarchate of the Ecumenical Throne at Constantinople. I have great admiration and respect for him. I've come to know him not only as a fellow Orthodox Christian and a metropolitan, but also in terms of context, ecumenical context, working with the World Council of Churches as a member of a delegation of the Ecumenical Throne, in another ecumenical context as well as Europe and the United States. So it's a pleasure to be able to introduce him here today. Metropolitan Athenagoras of Belgium is a hierarch of the Ecumenical Patriarchate. He was born in Belgium and comes from a family of priests. His father, indeed, was Archpriest Ignacy Pechstadt, who served in Ghent. Metropolitan Athenagoras conducted his studies and completed his studies at the University of Ghent, at the University of Thessaloniki, and also at the Ecumenical Institute of Marseille at the University of Geneva, and where he completed doctoral work on the history of the Orthodox presence in the Benelux countries. He has been a very, very active leader in the ecumenical movement in Europe and globally, and in particular in the Benelux countries and in Belgium. He has presided over multilingual in Flemish and French broadcasts, Orthodox Christian broadcasts. He has served as the Director of the Liaison Office of the Ecumenical Patriarchate to the European Union, and he has presided over the growth and flourishing of Orthodox parishes, Greek Orthodox parishes in the Benelux countries and in Brussels, in Belgium in particular. He also is very active, as I mentioned, in ecumenical work within Europe. He functions as a member of the Orthodox chaplaincies of the international airports. In fact, is I believe, the presiding hierarchy of that organization, and is also a member of the Concertation of Christian Churches in Belgium. Since 2003, he has been Metropolitan of Sinope and of the Benelux, Exarch of the Benelux countries. He was given the name on his ordination of Athenagoras after the great ecumenical patriarch and visionary Athenagoras I. It's a pleasure to welcome him here today.
Professors, dear participants, let me first read a short message of His Holiness the Ecumenical Patriarch Bartholomew, addressed to the International Conference under Caesar's Word that is held in Rome. It is with great joy that we learned of the International Conference on a Christian response to persecution, organized by the Universities of Notre and Georgetown, co-sponsored by the community of Sant'Egidio at the Pontifical Urban University, with the title Under Caesar's Word. We understand that your conference is part of a broader study on human rights and religious freedom with a view to eliminating intolerance and discrimination. For the Ecumenical Patriarchate, the subject of your gathering is in fact part of a centuries-long program. This is why 2 years ago we marked the 1700th anniversary of the Edict of Milan with a special seminar in Istanbul, recalling the decision by Emperors Constantine the Great in the East and Licinius in the West to stop the persecution against Christians, thereby allowing them to practice their faith and worship God freely. Despite this historical edict, through the centuries we have witnessed the abuse and violation of religious rights and freedom of worship, both against Christians as well as by Christians. The martyrs of the Roman Empire during the first 4 centuries were replaced by the neo-martyrs of the Ottoman Empire and the Eastern Europe over the last 5 centuries. And in our own age, We read each day of the persecution against Christians, minorities in northern Africa and especially throughout the Middle East, where the cradle of Christianity is literally being obliterated. We wholeheartedly share in the sorrow and suffering faced by the Christians living in and fleeing from these regions, while appealing to the rulers of this world to respect the fundamental human rights of life, dignity, and property. For our part, the Ecumenical Patriarchate will never cease, through all the spiritual means of its disposal, to support efforts toward peaceful dialogue among religions and ongoing cooperation among all people, irrespective of religion and race. Dear friends, your conference is an important step in this process of mutual understanding and reconciliation. May God abundantly bless your conference, deliberations, your services, and your loved ones. And now I will add some personal reflections, and I will share with you this on the subject of Orthodox Christianity and persecution. Although we sometimes may forget that persecution, being persecuted, lies at the heart of the Christian experience. Christ promised his disciples, "In the world you will have tribulation." And he left no ambiguity as to the nature of these tribulations, saying, "They will deliver you up to councils and scourge you in their synagogues. You will be brought before governors and kings for my sake, as a testimony to them and to the Gentiles. Brother will deliver a brother to death, and a father his child, and children will rise up against parents and cause them to be put to death. And you will be hated by all for my name's sake. And in these tribulations, not despite them, he calls his disciples blessed." And so, dear friends, it happened. From the days of the infants of Bethlehem, the Church has known persecution. It was exactly these persecutions, or rather the way Christians endured them, which inspired scores of people in the ancient world to abandon their religion and social status to follow Christ. The early Church knew countless examples of soldiers and other officials who were moved to faith in Christ by the example of Christians suffering martyrdom. The Greek word says, witness, with inner peace, with blessing, those that persecuted them. And in the account of the martyrdom of the 40 martyrs of Sebaste, 40 soldiers refusing to worship pagan gods and forced to stand in cold water until death, we read that when one of the 40 lost heart and left the lake, a Roman guard took his place. This phenomenon reached even the highest ranks of society. 2 high-ranking Roman soldiers in Syria, Sergius and Bacchus, refusing to sacrifice to the idols under Maximian, were stripped from their insignia and paraded through the streets in humiliating clothing. Exiled to the borders of Syria, they were tortured and beheaded. The relative freedom from persecutions that followed the conversion of Constantine the Great did not mean total freedom from persecution. Various emperors tried to interfere in the life and doctrine of the Church. Great saints, such as Saint John Chrysostomos, Saint Theodoros the Studite, and Saint Maximus the Confessor, paid a high price for their faithfulness to Christ in the face of the state. In the life of Saint John Chrysostomos, we find an attitude that the Church would show facing persecution and oppression from various authorities, including ecclesiastical in the centuries that would follow. Victim of political intrigues, Saint John was about to be exiled from the throne of the Ecumenical Patriarchate. And on the eve of the events, his friends came to lament his departure, to complain that the preaching of the gospel would cease in the churches of God. But the Patriarch replied, and he said, "Enough, brothers, don't say more. I repeat what I have already told you. Don't abandon your churches. The service of teaching neither started with me nor ends with me." And when his friends told him that they would be forced to sign false statements against him, he answered them, "Remain in communion with the church, but don't sign." During its many centuries of life under various rulers, this spirit remained alive within the Orthodox Church. It always prayed for all rulers, both good and evil. In the Eucharistic canon of St. Basil the Great, when praying for the civil authorities, we find the following words: "In your goodness, guard those that are good and make good those that are evil." It preserved its liturgical life, its churches and monasteries as the greatest treasure of the Orthodox Christian nations of the Middle East and the Balkans. And when urged to betray Christ, it would witness to him with blood. The Church of Constantinople and the one of Greece knows a multitude of new martyrs who preferred a public baptism and confession of Christ, followed by martyrdom, to a comfortable life based on renouncing him. Now, of course, it would be unfair and incomplete to limit this brief overview to this attitude of passive martyrdom. The life of the Church in its history is not univocal. There have been cases where the Church inspired action in the face of persecution. And I would like to close with 3 examples from very different eras and places. An example of an active attitude concerns the sad case when persecutions happened within the Church, referring in this case not to the Church as the mystical body of Christ, but in the institutional sense. And we already saw the exile of Saint John Chrysostomos. Here, in several cases, the Church has shown the courage to acknowledge and correct. So it happened when the relics of St. John Chrysostomos, who died in exile, were brought back to Constantinople in 438. Emperor Theodosius II prostrated himself before the saint and asked his forgiveness for the exile. And when in 1961, Bishop Nectarius of Egina was canonized by the Orthodox Church, the Patriarchate of Alexandria, which had previously persecuted and expelled and disposed him, issued a bull asking the saint's forgiveness, a letter that can be seen in his cell today. And I quote, "We beseech Saint Nectarius to forgive both us, unworthy as we are, and our predecessors, our brothers of the throne of Alexandria, for opposition to the saint and for all which, due to human weakness or error, our Holy Father Bishop of Pendapolis, St. Nectarius, suffered. Signs of the willingness to correct what had been unjust treatment. And then I would like to mention a group of saints recently canonized by the Ecumenical Patriarchate. With the rise of anti-Semitism in Europe in the 1930s, a group of Orthodox faithful in France quickly understood its diabolic nature. At one of their meetings, the great Russian Orthodox thinker, Nicholas Berdyaev, gave the following definition of the attitude of Christians facing the persecution of others, saying, there have always been two races in the world, and they exist today. And this division is more important than all other divisions. There are those who crucify and those who are crucified, those that oppress and those who are oppressed, those who hate and those who are hated, those who inflict suffering and those who suffer, those who persecute and those who are persecuted. It needs no explanation on whose side Christians should be. Inspired by these words, the group set up a network, the Orthodox Action, that saved many Jews during the German occupation, for which they finally paid with their own lives. Although, as clergy and monastics, they would not take up arms, the group remains an example of courageous and non-violent resistance to the persecution of others. And let me now say some words about the church I represent here today, the Ecumenical Patriarchate of Constantinople. Historical Constantinople and modern-day Istanbul is a city where religions and cultures converge. Thus, the Ecumenical Patriarchate, with its seats in this city for 17 centuries, has coexisted peacefully and constructively with Islam and Judaism. While contact between Orthodox and Muslims has been an everyday process in multicultural Istanbul, an academic dialogue of friendship and mutual understanding between Christians and Islam started in 1986 in the Orthodox Center of the Ecumenical Patriarchate in Chambézy, Geneva, followed by 9 further conferences. And under these circumstances, Orthodoxy, headed by the Ecumenical Patriarchate, whose headquarters are situated in a Muslim city, has all the credentials to assume the role of a bridge between Europe and Islam. Ecumenical Patriarch Bartholomew is one of the signers of the Bosphorus Declaration that took place in Constantinople in 1994. The topic of the conference was on peace and tolerance, sponsored by the Appeal of Conscience based in New York. Jewish, Muslim and Roman Catholic representatives, together with the Ecumenical Patriarch, signed the Bosphorus Declaration. The statement states, "We stand firmly against those who violate the sanctity of human life and pursue policies in defiance of moral values. We reject the concept that it is possible to justify one's actions in any armed conflicts in the name of God. We totally condemn those who commit brutalities, killings, rapes, mutilations, and inhuman beatings. And in addition, the declaration calls upon all people of goodwill to recognize and allow the other the right to practice their religion. The statement says, we agreed to condemn war and armed conflict, to demand initiation of constructive dialogue to solve outstanding issues between those of different faiths, and to demand the right to practice one's religion in freedom and with dignity. Despite these efforts from the Ecumenical Patriarchate, the same Patriarchate faces still quite some problems within Turkey of today, where it exists, and thus this from the apostolic times, long before the Ottomans arrived. Turkey continues to violate provisions of the Lausanne Treaty regarding minorities, as well as provisions in the European Convention on Human Rights. That's why the Ecumenical Patriarchate continues to face many problems today. First, the non-recognition of the ecumenical nature of the Patriarchate. It is recognized as the Patriarchate for the Greeks in Istanbul. Turkey does not recognize that the Ecumenical Patriarchate has a legal personality. It refuses the reopening of the Halki Seminary, which was closed down by the Turkish authorities in 1971, and it is still one of the Patriarchate's fundamental demands to reopen it in order to be able to train new priests and to ensure its historical continuity. And then we have the question of the handling of property and ownership rights of the Patriarchate. All the churches have the church has no document for the buildings, not only within Istanbul, but all over Turkey. And then the last point is, of course, the religious freedom in Turkey and the future of the Ecumenical Patriarchate. But I have to be honest and to say that with the government of today, I would say since about 10 years, there is some improvement. And for instance, now some 30 metropolitans belonging to the Ecumenical Patriarchate, but serving abroad in America or in Europe or in Asia or in Australia, they could make application for Turkish citizenship. And this is important because for the election of a new ecumenical patriarch, the Turkish government wants that only the metropolitans with Turkish citizenship vote, and also that the candidate for the patriarchal throne has Turkish citizenship. Secondly, there is also some improvement in the dialogue with the minorities in Turkey. To conclude, freedom, respect, or the dignity and integrity of each human person, it is fundamental for the world we live in. Freedom is not only personal, it is also interpersonal. The self has its being and its fulfillment in the other. We cannot be truly free, we cannot be truly personal unless we are in communion with other persons. We need you in order to be ourselves. And if we make that the guideline in our personal religious life, and if we make that our guideline as citizens of our own nation and of the world, then without doubt, religion will have a vital role to play in a changing world. Thank you for your attention.